Welcome to Grow Money Business, the podcast dedicated to helping business owners optimize income, pay less in tax, and invest prudently. Here's your host, Grant Bledsoe.
Hello, everybody. Grant Bledsoe here. Welcome back to Grow Money Business. This week on the show, my guest is Christian Worstell. Christian is an author, writer, a journalist, and a health insurance specialist for helpadvisor.com. Specifically, helpadvisor.com writes and publishes content about public health systems for anyone over 65, specifically Medicare and Medicaid. Christian joins us on the show today to talk specifically about Medicare, which is a subject he is an expert on. I wanted to have Christian on the show today because we are rapidly approaching the annual enrollment period for Medicare Advantage plans, and Christian was able to run us through all the basics of Medicare that you might need to know about as a current or future beneficiary of plan benefits. We talked about enrollment, eligibility, enrollment windows, the differences between parts A, B, and D, Medicare Advantage versus Medicare Supplemental plans, where people go wrong, and a whole bunch of other stuff I didn't know about Medicare in general. He also gives us his opinion on the funding status of Medicare as a system, how long it might be good for, how long we might be funded for, and some options for shoring up the deficits that we seem to be running with regard to the system and revenues coming into it. This is a really helpful conversation for me, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Hey everyone, I need to interject quickly to remind you all that nothing found in today's episode or any other episode of Grow Money Business should be considered financial, investing, legal, tax, fitness, or even relationship advice. It's content that you're free to use and to deploy on your own terms. And before taking any actions on content found on the show, please do consult with your tax professional, your attorney, or your financial planner. If you don't have a financial planner, head on over to threeoakswealth.com to learn more about what we do in terms of financial planning and investments and how we help clients on an ongoing basis. And we are live. Christian, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you very much. Excited to talk about Medicare with you today.
I'm excited to talk about Medicare with you as well. To kick us off, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what your background is?
Yeah, Christian Worstell. I'm a licensed health insurance agent with kind of a specialty or a focus on Medicare, private Medicare insurance. I'm also the senior writer for helpadvisor.com, which is an organization devoted to creating resourceful and helpful content about public benefits for the over 65 demographics, such as Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and kind of a range of other health and finance and general lifestyle topics.
Interesting. How did you get into the field?
Almost kind of by happenstance. I was working for a company that was in SEO, kind of digital marketing, writing. And we were bought out by a company that, sells private Medicare insurance. And so I decided to get my insurance license and kind of went that route, and also leveraged my background as a writer and journalist to sort of do what I do now. Kind of a jack of all trades sort of thing.
Very cool. And now you have the privilege of writing a whole bunch of stuff about Medicare, Medicaid, and public programs for the over 65 crowd, it sounds like. And is that your sole focus?
That is our sole focus. And I won't be eligible for Medicare for another 20 years, but I feel like I know more than a lot of incoming beneficiaries. So I'm certainly getting a head start on it.
Right on. Well, I've got a ton of questions for you about Medicare. Yeah. And this is a topic that we've covered on the show in the past, maybe a couple of years ago, but it's been a while since we've touched on just what Medicare is, the original Medicare program, how and when and why are you eligible for it? What are the differences between Parts A and Parts B? Maybe you could give us just a high-level overview, and we could kind of cover the Medicare basics before talking about the annual enrollment period this year and what changes might be coming down the pipe to the program.
Yeah, so the best way to describe Medicare is there is a public sector and a private sector. So within public Medicare, so we're talking about, publicly funded, taxpayer funded, you have Medicare Part A and Medicare Part B. And together, those make up what is called Original Medicare. You might hear it referred to as regular Medicare or traditional Medicare. Original Medicare is kind of the technical term for that. And then if you jump over to the private sector of Medicare, you have three different types. You have Medicare Advantage, which is also Medicare Part C. You have Medicare Part D, and then you have Medicare Supplement insurance, also called Medigap. So two types of coverage in the public sector of Medicare, three types of coverage in the private sector, and you can mix and match across both verticals and have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. There's a number of different coverage combinations that you're allowed to have. Each one has its own rules and restrictions about, your eligibility, when you can enroll, things of that nature, which I'm sure we will cover today.
Yeah, right on. So let's start with public or original Medicare. I think most of our listeners are probably in the position where they see the money going out of their paycheck to contribute toward Medicare benefits sometime in the future, but might not understand how long you have to pay into the system, when you might become eligible, and what you might be, how much it might cost once you start drawing benefits as a beneficiary of the program. How long do you have to pay into the system to become eligible, and then what happens next?
Yeah, so you don't actually have to pay into the system to become eligible for Medicare. You do have to pay into the system to get premium-free Medicare Part A. So as long as you are at least 65 years old and either a U.S. citizen or a permanent legal resident of at least 5 years, you're eligible for Medicare. Now, on top of that, if you have paid your Medicare taxes for at least 10 years, it does not have to be consecutive, just 10 years total, you will qualify for premium-free Part A. That means you will not pay a monthly premium for your Medicare Part A, which covers your inpatient care. So when you're admitted to a hospital, a skilled nursing facility, other types of inpatient facilities, that is where Medicare Part A takes care of you. And most people do not pay a premium. 10 years, most people are going to accumulate that by the time they're 65. So not difficult to qualify for Medicare, not difficult to qualify for premium-free Medicare Part A.
And how do spouses work on that? If you have one spouse in a household with a bunch of work experience and another spouse who may have stayed home with the kids and does not have 10 years into the program, does the stay-at-home spouse also qualify for premium-free Medicare by virtue of the working spouse's benefits?
Correct, yeah. As long as the non-working spouse that does not have 10 years of work credits is at least 65 and, is U.S. citizen, et cetera, as long as they're eligible in that way, yes. So it's either you or your spouse has to accumulate at least 10 years, or they call them 40 quarters, 40 credits, which equals 10 years of working credits. Yep.
So if you don't have the 10 years, you're 65, you enroll in Part A. How is Medicare collecting the money from you? Or if you have less than 10 years of working experience into the program, that also means that you're not eligible for any kind of Social Security benefit. Are you sending the government a check every month to pay your Part A premiums?
Correct. You will pay a premium for Part A, and Part A is pretty expensive if you do not have those 10 years of working credits. I've seen instances where people have like 8 or 9 years of credits, and they have literally just gone back to work or continued working for another year or two to meet those, because that's probably going to be in your best interest rather than paying, a few $100s a month just for Part A.
Right.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's easy to qualify for premium-free Part A, but expensive if you don't.
So Part A is your inpatient and emergency services, as I understand it, right? So ambulance rides as well as costs once you're admitted to the hospital, but not your primary care services like going to see your everyday doctor. Doesn't that fall under Part B?
Correct. That is Part B. So the best way to remember it is Part A is inpatient and Part B is outpatient. So You go to see your doctor, that's under Part B. Any sort of outpatient, physical therapy, things of that nature, durable medical equipment, things like wheelchairs, or, if you have to you break your ankle and you have to use a pair of crutches, those crutches will be covered under Part B. Part A, inpatient, Part B, outpatient is the best way to just kind of remember it in the most simplistic form.
And for Part B, you're paying a premium whether you have 10 years of work experience or not. Is the premium the same if you have less than 10 years of experience paying into the system?
The Part B premium is based on income. So most people pay the standard premium, which this year was $164.90 per month. Those making higher incomes will pay a little bit more on a sliding scale. There's sort of a surtax added. It's called IRMA. So if you are a high income earner, you will pay a little bit more for your Part B. Most people pay that standard $164.90 premium. It fluctuates year to year. Usually it goes up. Every once in a while, they throw you a bone and it goes down, but usually it's going to go up a little bit every year. But yeah, that's how that works. It's based on income.
And if you have 10 years of experience in the system, then you're eligible for Social Security as well.
Yeah.
Are they taking your Part B premiums out of your Social Security benefits? Are you paying the benefits out of pocket? Do you have a choice?
You do have a choice. Most people just elect to have it deducted straight from their Social Security check. So you're kind of eliminating that middleman of having to then make that payment every month. And in fact, you actually do get a very slight discount if you do, at least in the private sector, if you do elect to have it deducted from your Social Security check. And that is how most people just do it.
Yeah. I didn't realize there's a discount. That's cool.
Yeah.
So enrollment is you're eligible to enroll at age 65. And as I understand it, you have a window of a few months before and a few months after your 65th birthday where you absolutely want to enroll because there are potential lifetime penalties if you wait until after that period. Could you help us understand that a little bit better?
Yeah, so everyone, when you become eligible for Medicare, you will get what is called an initial enrollment period. So that is hey, you're eligible for Medicare. Here is your first enrollment period, the first time that you can take action and sign up. That starts 3 months before the month you turn 65, includes the month of your birthday, and then continues for another 3 months after. So we're talking about 7 consecutive months. You can sign up for Part A, Part B, Medicare Advantage, and Medicare Part D during that time. If you fail to take action during that time, there are late enrollment penalties that you will have to pay, which last for the rest of your life that you're on Medicare. The other risk is that you can have a coverage gap. So if you fail to sign up during your initial enrollment period, you will most likely have to wait until the annual enrollment period in the fall. So you might run into an instance where you have, 2, 3, 4, 5 months of no health insurance. And you're going to have to figure out something, try to find some sort of short-term care insurance there or something. That's one of the overlooked consequences, I think, when people fail to take action on time. Part B and Part D do have late enrollment penalties. And for Part B, it's 10% of the Part B premium, which again, this year was almost $165. So we're talking about an extra, $16-17 tacked on to your premium every month. And that does not go away. It's not just a one-time fee. 10 years from now, you'll still be paying that. 20 years from now, if you're on Medicare, you'll still be paying it. It follows you forever. It's so very, very important. I've done the math before, and if you don't sign up right away and you incur that Part B late enrollment penalty, the way it adds up every month for years and years, you're talking a lot of money down the drain. Part D also has a late enrollment penalty, 1% of a base premium every month. Again, lasts forever, does not go away. So,
yeah. Is that a flat 10% regardless of how late you are, whether you enroll in like month 8 or at age 75? Is it flat?
Correct.
Flat 10% either way?
Flat 10%. And it's 10% of the 10% is staying the same, but that premium is going up usually every year. So the amount that you're paying on that 10% is also going up along with it. $16 this year is your 10%, but next year it could be $18, and the next year it could be $22, depending upon how much that Part B premium goes up and what equates to 10% of it.
And is it 10% of the base premium or 10% of the premium you're paying, which might include those IRMA surcharges?
Yeah, for Part D, they use what's called a national base premium, which in a simple form, you can think of it as kind of an average premium. So it might be, $32 a month. And that's set by the government every year. They determine what the national base premium is, and you'll pay 1% of that. But again, that next year, that national base premium is in all likelihood going to go up a little bit. So your share of that, that 1% will in all likelihood go up along with it. And then, of course, you have IRMA coming into play, which, I touched on that with Part B. That also comes into play with Part D. So higher income earners, it's based on your income from 2 years prior. So if you're signing up for 2024, they're going to look at your income from 2022 and base your IRMA surtax off of that.
And the 10% penalty includes that IRMA surtax or just the base premium?
Correct, just the base premium. Yeah.
Just the base premium. Okay, for B and D is what you're saying. Okay, gotcha. So how does it work if you're still employed at 65?
Yeah, so as long as if you're still employed at 65, in all likelihood, you're going to qualify for premium-free Part A. There's really not much reason to not go ahead and enroll because it does serve as sort of free supplemental coverage. Depending upon the size of your company, your employer insurance might serve as the primary payer, and then your Medicare would serve as the secondary payer, or your Medicare might serve as the primary payer and employer insurance would be a supplemental. But no matter way you look at it, if you're not paying a premium for Part A, there's really no reason to not have it. And then Part B, of course, you will have a monthly premium. So Part B is optional. And if you're still working, you are exempt from those late enrollment penalties. So you don't have to sign up during those 7 months. If you are still working, you can work until you're 70 years old. At the time that you do retire and leave your company insurance, you'll be eligible to sign up without a late enrollment penalty.
So your initial enrollment period just gets postponed until after you stop working. So do you still have a 7-month window after your employment ends at that point?
Yeah, you'll still have the 7-month window when you turn 65 for Part A. And at that point, you can add Part B if you want, as well as private Medicare insurance if you want. But if you choose not to sign up for Part B, that's okay because you have credible coverage. So whenever you do decide to leave the workforce and you leave your employer plan, you get to start over again with sort of a Part B enrollment period where you can sign up without any late enrollment penalties. Same with Part D as well.
Okay. And how long is that period? What's your window like?
I think in those circumstances, you're given maybe like 6 months. Yeah, okay. It's going to be pretty similar. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you pointed out earlier, clearly you want to get enrolled as soon as your employment ends so that you don't have a gap in coverage. So I would suspect most people, unless they're totally asleep at the wheel, are not going to wait until month 6 to figure this out.
Yeah, one of the things, so Social Security and Medicare, those ages used to line up at 65, right? You turn 65, you're eligible for Social Security, you're eligible for Medicare. But over the years, we've seen the Social Security, full eligibility age creep up and up. I think we're up to 68 now for full Social Security benefits, something like that. And it has created a little bit of a disconnect because you turn 65, you're eligible for Medicare, but you're not going to be automatically enrolled unless you're collecting your Social Security benefits. So what we've been seeing a lot with the past couple of years, this actually happened to my mom a couple of years ago. You turn 65 and you sit around and you wait for your Medicare card to show up in the mail because you think you're getting automatically enrolled. However, automatic enrollment only happens for those people who are collecting Social Security. So if you're choosing to delay, you're not going to be automatically enrolled. You have to manually sign up. Well, then, month 3 goes by and month 5 goes by, and all of a sudden that open enrollment window is closing on you. And you actually have to take action. You have to go online or you have to visit your local Social Security office and actually manually sign up for Medicare. Automatic enrollment only happens if you are already collecting Social Security at the time that you turn 65. So that's something that we try to communicate a lot with people. I think there could be some better efforts at building awareness around that, since that is, pretty new here in the last few years when those two ages for Medicare and Social Security all of a sudden stopped lining up like that.
Right. Particularly if, these days your full retirement age for Social Security is closer to 67.
Yeah.
When there is a larger than a 3-month period between age 65 and 67, which would mean that you better take action or you might be subject to those late enrollment penalties that we talked about.
Yep, 100%.
So let's talk about private Medicare. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned a couple different plans: Medicare Advantage, Medicare Supplemental, and Part D. Let's dive into each of those 3.
Yeah, so Medicare Advantage, which is technically Medicare Part C, but more often than not, you hear it referred to as Medicare Advantage. Those are plans offered by private insurance companies. By law, they have to include all Medicare Part A and Part B benefits. Once that minimum threshold is met, they can then include some additional benefits that are not found in original Medicare. Some of the more common or more popular extra benefits that you'll get in these plans are prescription drug coverage, coverage for routine dental care, routine vision care, fitness memberships, things of that nature. So that's a way of getting your original Medicare benefits from a private insurance company instead of the federal government, and also getting some extra benefits for things that you're not going to get in original Medicare. So that's Medicare Advantage. Medicare Part D provides coverage exclusively for prescription drugs, and that's it. So original Medicare does not cover prescription drugs that you're going to fill at a pharmacy. If you are going to have prescription drug coverage, it has to come from a Medicare Advantage plan that offers that as an extra benefit, or a standalone Part D plan that's slapped on top of your original Medicare coverage. And then lastly, Medicare Supplement Insurance, also called Medigap, that provides coverage for deductibles, copayments, and coinsurance that you have with original Medicare. So when you have original Medicare, you're still paying, you're still reaching in your pocket. You still have a deductible to meet. You still have to make, coinsurance payments. If you go to see your doctor, Medicare will pay 80%. You're still going to be responsible for 20% of that doctor appointment. It's quite similar to, what you're used to with employer insurance or marketplace insurance that you've had for, your whole life. Medigap will pick up the tab for those little out-of-pocket payments. Your Medigap plan will pay that 20% for you, pay that deductible for you, et cetera, in exchange for a monthly premium. So it's really a way of pay a little bit more upfront in a premium and pay a lot less when you actually use your coverage.
So who's a good fit? Typically, the way that I've thought about this over the years is I kind of separate Part D from Medicare Advantage and Medicare Supplemental, because Part D is just your prescription drugs. If you opt not to enroll in a Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplemental plan, which to be clear are totally optional, right? You don't have to get into those. Then even so, you should really strongly consider a Part D plan, cover your prescription drugs, so you're not paying 100% of whatever the pharmacy wants to charge you.
Yeah.
Right. So what are the key differences between Medicare Advantage and Medicare Supplemental, and who would be a good fit for either one of them?
Yeah. The thing that I tell people is, how do you prefer to spend your money on your healthcare? Do you want to pay a higher premium every month up front and then not have to reach very far into your pocket when you do see a doctor? If that's how you like to budget, Medigap or Medicare Supplement insurance is perfect. That's kind of what it's designed for. Medicare Advantage, you will pay a lower premium. In fact, a lot of Medicare Advantage plans these days actually have $0 premiums. You're still paying your Part B premium, but there's nothing extra for the Advantage plan. However, when you use the coverage, you will have, a deductible. You're going to have co-payments or co-insurance. So in that case, if you prefer to spend less upfront and pay a little bit more as you go, as you use it, it's really all personal preference, and there's no universal right or wrong answer. We all like to kind of budget things differently that way when it comes to healthcare. So that's the first question I ask is how you want to, how do you want to spend your money? It's your money. How and when and where do you want to spend it is kind of the root of that conversation.
Right. Almost everybody that we've ever worked with in our financial planning firm prefers the Medicare supplemental route because, as we get older, we know that our healthcare costs are generally going to go up. We might need more care. We might need more or different prescription drugs. Most people that we work with, at least, have preferred to go the supplemental route because it's just more comfortable to them with the rising cost of healthcare in general. It's a much better fit for that kind of profile. And on top of that, you have a bunch of different types of supplemental plans you can choose from. Some of them cover you for stuff that happens on an international trip. Some of them don't. There's a wide variety of things that you can find coverage for, and the supplemental plans are generally the ones that check the boxes that our clients are looking for. Can you talk a little bit about the differences of the different types of supplemental plans there are?
Yes, there are 10 plans, and they are all standardized by the federal government. They're all identified by a letter. So Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. You're in Sacramento. If you buy a Plan A from, health insurance company A out there in Sacramento, and I buy a Plan A out here in North Carolina from a different health insurance company, they're going to have the same benefits. The cost, the monthly premium will be different insurance carrier, different location, et cetera, but the benefits will be exactly the same. So they're all standardized. And the way the plans are designed, it kind of moves on a spectrum. You have your very, very basic plan that only covers a few of your out-of-pocket costs. And then you have some very comprehensive plans that will cover almost, if not everything, that you're forced to pay out of pocket under Medicare. Obviously, those ones will have a little bit higher premiums in them. So once you choose to go the Medigap route, then you have to sit down and look at those 10 different plans, compare premiums, see which ones cover which benefits, which of those covered benefits are most important to you. You touched on, travel. That's a good point. Medicare Advantage plans are often restricted to a network of providers, whereas Medigap, you can use it all over the United States. Anywhere that original Medicare is accepted, they will accept your Medigap plan. So if you are retired and you're doing a lot of traveling, Medigap is perfect for you because no matter where you are in the country, you go see a doctor that accepts Medicare, they will accept your Medigap plan. That's not necessarily going to be the case as much for Medicare Advantage, where you might be restricted to a county or a state or a region, an HMO, things of that nature.
Gotcha. So on the private side, we've got a lot of choices to make as consumers of this type of coverage, right? On the public side, you're either in or you're out. You don't have any choices to make. It's not going to change. The program itself might change a little bit year to year, but you don't have to opt into anything. Once you're in, you're in. On the private side, you have an opportunity to make changes on an annual basis during the annual enrollment period, during the open enrollment period, which our listeners are probably familiar with because that's how typical health coverage works anyway. You have one window during the year to make changes for the following year. How does this work? Can you change between a supplemental and a Medicare Advantage plan, or vice versa? Can you swap between the different supplemental or Medicare Advantage plans? How much discretion do you have on a year-to-year basis?
Yeah, the open enrollment period, AEP or annual enrollment period, which takes place every fall, October 15th to December 7th every year. It really only pertains to Medicare Advantage and Medicare Part D. And during that enrollment period, you can switch from one Medicare Advantage plan to another or one Part D plan to another. You can switch from Medicare Advantage back to just original Medicare and add a Part D plan if you want. You can drop your Part D plan and just go to original Medicare. Medigap, you can actually disenroll from a Medigap plan at any time throughout the year. There's really no restrictions. If you don't like your plan, you can drop it. And there are certain restrictions about if you drop a Medigap plan, can you then add a Medicare Advantage plan? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. If you are within your first year, if you signed up for Medicare Advantage, right out of the gate, you have 12 months to disenroll from that. You don't necessarily have to wait until open or annual enrollment period. If you don't like it right away, you have 12 months. You can ditch your plan. You can add a Medigap plan during that time. The thing with Medigap is while you can disenroll and then re-enroll again at any time, you only have a 6-month window where you have what's called guaranteed issue rights, and that makes you exempt from any medical underwriting. And that 6-month window begins the month that you have Part A and Part B, and it lasts for 6 consecutive months. You sign up for a Medigap plan during that time, you're going to be offered a standard monthly premium that is given to all new enrollees that are signing up during that time. If you wait to sign up for Medigap after that enrollment period closes, or if you one day down the road drop your Medigap plan and want to change to a different plan, you will be subject to medical underwriting. So the insurance company at that point has the right to ask you health questions. They can even administer, a physical exam. They will charge you higher premiums if you are in poor health or have certain conditions. They even reserve the right to deny you coverage altogether if you are in poor health and they feel like you are too risky to insure. So with Medigap, I try to encourage people to, decide right away if you want to go the Medigap route or the Medicare Advantage route. That way you're not going to find yourself in that underwriting situation where you're going to be faced with higher premiums and you waited too long, now you can't afford it, or they're denying you coverage altogether. So yeah, one route is kind of original Medicare only, another is Medicare Advantage, and another is Part D plus Medigap is kind of the most 3 common routes that we see.
Right. Where we've generally steered people over the years, and I would venture to guess that most of our listeners on the show are probably higher income people, because of those restrictions and the guaranteed issue nature of the Medigap policies, we've generally steered people toward more comprehensive Medigap policies out of the gate. Mm-hmm. And years down the road, if they want to make a change and downshift to a different, less comprehensive Medigap policy, then if they have the health that can substantiate the underwriting at the time, then that could make sense. But if you can afford the premiums for that more comprehensive policy out of the gate, honestly, I mean, the top causes of death in our country are cancer and heart disease, number 1, number 2, and I don't know which one's which. That requires a lot of medical intervention if either of those afflictions might apply to you in the future. And starting out with a more comprehensive coverage that's where you're guaranteed to get into a broad policy at the very beginning, it just makes a lot of sense if you can fit that cost into the rest of your retirement income plan.
100%. Yeah. If you are of higher income and you can afford those higher premiums that come with Medigap, I agree, especially if you're talking about Plan F and Plan G. Those plans are not available to incoming beneficiaries, but if you were eligible for Medicare prior to 2020, you can still get into those plans. Um, Plan F and Plan C. For incoming beneficiaries, Plan G is the most comprehensive, and all incoming beneficiaries are going to be eligible for that if it's available in their area. And with Plan G, you're going to pay a higher monthly premium, but gosh, I mean, when you see the doctor, you're not going to pay hardly anything out of pocket. I mean, you're not really going to get any. Certainly not going to get any, unexpected surprise bills. The only thing that it really doesn't cover is the Part B annual deductible, which is $226 a year. I mean, you're not talking, about any kind of crazy expense there. So it does certainly offer you kind of a peace of mind. I mean, it may hurt to write the check every month for that higher premium. However, that comes with that peace of mind of, hey, you get sick, you go to the hospital, cancer, something like that, you're not going to hardly pay anything, if anything. So there is kind of a push and a pull there.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic too, because usually there's this trade-off between your general level of wealth and the amount of insurance you need. And, if you're like Warren Buffett or Jeff Bezos, I mean, those guys probably have insurance, but they certainly don't need it. There's
Right.
nothing that could happen to them, health or otherwise, that would not be affordable, right? They go in to see their primary care physician, they need surgery or something like that. They just pay cash out of pocket. And, especially with life and disability insurance and some of these other forms of insurance that are really common that we really like people to get, the wealthier you are, the less you need that coverage. But this is a different dynamic because we simply don't know. I mean, that's the nature of insurance, is risk pooling, right? We don't know what might happen to our health down the road. And because the cost of health coverage and surgical intervention and all these things, pharmaceutical drugs, are so exorbitantly expensive right now, it just makes a whole lot of sense to start with a comprehensive plan. You're really saving yourself trouble down the road if and only if you can afford those premiums out of the gate.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that original Medicare does not have an annual out-of-pocket maximum. So if you only have original Medicare, Part A and Part B, theoretically, you're responsible for an infinite amount of money in co-payments and co-insurance. And, a Medicare Advantage plan, by law, they have to include an annual out-of-pocket maximum. This year, $8,300 a year was the maximum, and I think the average was around $5,000. And with Medigap, it's kind of that safety net. And Medigap is, in essence, kind of serves as an annual out-of-pocket maximum in itself. You pay 12 months of premiums in exchange for having that out-of-pocket maximum in practicality. So I think that's one thing that it's one of the common misconceptions about original Medicare is that most people think it probably has an annual out-of-pocket maximum because most employer insurance plans do. And then they get on Medicare and they're like, wait a minute, what if I get, cancer or something like that? I mean, you're talking, a 20% coinsurance doesn't sound like a lot, but when your treatment is $20,000 for cancer, it's a heck of a lot of money. So having that safety net of, an annual out-of-pocket maximum with a Medicare Advantage plan or a Medigap plan that sort of serves in practicality as an out-of-pocket maximum is very important to have if you can afford it. Yeah.
And if you're thinking that you can't afford any additional healthcare costs whatsoever, you mentioned earlier that some of the Medicare Advantage plans have no premiums, right? So is it safe to say that at bare minimum, it is? Well, let me ask you this. Is there any circumstance you can think of where you would really only want original Medicare without the additional coverage of a Medicare Advantage plan?
If there is a $0 premium plan available in your area and it includes your favorite doctors, your most convenient pharmacy, I see very little reason to. One advantage of original Medicare is you can use it all over the United States. If you're in a Medicare Advantage plan, those are structured as, HMOs or PPOs, just like you're typically used to. So the geography of where you can use them might be a little bit restricted. That doctor that you've been seeing for the last 25 years that you have a great rapport with, maybe he's not in network, and maybe that makes you think twice about signing up for that plan because you want to continue seeing that doctor. But there's very little reason if there is a $0 plan, because especially if it comes with, routine dental coverage, routine vision coverage, if you just have original Medicare, well, you still have to then say, okay, well, how am I going to pay for my dental appointments? I can pay out of pocket every time I go. I can maybe buy a standalone dental and vision plan, but you are going to have to account for that in one way or another. And if you can find a Medicare Advantage plan that has a low or $0 premium that includes those benefits, it does make sense to go ahead and sign up for that because you're still getting all of your Part A and Part B anyway.
Totally. Okay. Gotcha. So what's new for 2024 then? We're sitting here in the beginning of October. You mentioned the open enrollment period for Medicare Advantage is October 15th through December 7th. Did I hear that right?
Yep.
So what's new on the docket for 2024 that people can opt into during this period?
As far as coverage and benefits go, there's not a whole lot happening in 2024. In some years, you see a number of new benefits introduced to Medicare, either in the public sector, original Medicare, or that are approved for Medicare Advantage coverage. We saw a lot of that during COVID. A lot of telehealth benefits were adopted, things of that nature. In 2024, really probably the biggest ones pertain to Part D and some of the cancer drugs that are now being introduced and covered. Not a ton of changes on the docket upcoming unless there's anything happening last minute. And in some years, it does happen pretty last minute. We're in early October right now, so don't count them out. Premiums, deductibles, typically you can count on to change a little bit every year. Most of the time in original Medicare, they're going to go up. In private Medicare, Part D, Medicare Advantage, they've actually been creeping down in recent years. We're now up to about 50% of all Medicare beneficiaries are now enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan. So that's been going up. I mean, even just a few years ago, it was hovering around 35%. And it's been steadily going up every year. We're now approaching about 50% of everyone on Medicare is now in a Medicare Advantage plan, which is, it's more money coming into the system. Those premiums are coming down a little bit. But, really the best way, if have a discussion with your licensed insurance agent, ask them what's new. They'll be able to kind of go over some of the finer details with you.
Are the portion of Medicare beneficiaries enrolled? So there are now 50% of all Medicare beneficiaries are enrolled in Medicare Advantage plans. Is that because fewer people are on Medigap plans in favor of Medicare Advantage, or are more people who were only on original Medicare starting to add Medicare Advantage to it?
I believe it's the latter. There hasn't been a sizable downshift in Medigap enrollment. I think, Medicare Advantage plans were really only introduced to the market in the last 15 to 20 years. The benefits have been getting better. The premiums have been getting better. I think more people are justifying that shift, kind of what we talked about, just a few moments ago. If there is a $0 plan available where you live, there's very little reason not to go ahead and join it. And I think people are understanding that. More and more plans are offering $0 premiums. More and more plans are offering prescription drug coverage. The benefits are getting, those extra benefits that you don't get in original Medicare are starting to get a little bit more robust in Medicare Advantage. So yeah, we're seeing, the percentage of people that are only on original Medicare is shrinking every year. People are choosing Medicare Advantage, they're choosing Medigap, they're choosing Part D. that portion that is only on A and B and nothing else continues to get smaller and smaller every year.
Interesting. Very cool. So where do people screw this up? When you talk to a lot of people about these decisions that we covered today. Where do you see people get into hot water?
Yeah, we touched on late enrollment penalties, and that's a big one. You don't want to be saddled with those extra costs. I mean, the whole purpose of health insurance is to save money on your health care. It's not to pay more for it. Coverage gaps. I also see people just maybe not enrolling in plans that really align with their needs. So, for example, there's a certain type of Medicare Advantage plan called a special needs plan. These are plans that are designed for people with certain conditions. Say if you have diabetes, there's a Medicare Advantage plan that is specifically designed for people with diabetes, and it has coverage of diabetes treatment that is much more robust than in your run-of-the-mill everyday Medicare Advantage plan. If you have a particular health condition, there's a good chance that there is a special needs plan out there that is designed for people with your condition. Look there first. People who maybe wear hearing aids, but they sign up for a Medicare Advantage plan that does not include routine hearing coverage. Do an audit of your health. And we can't always predict what sort of healthcare we're going to need. I mean, our healthcare needs 5 years from now could be drastically different than they are now. We can't really predict that, but you can make a good faith effort to kind of audit yourself, project which benefits are most important to you, and align with a plan accordingly.
Very cool. So last question I had for you and topic I wanted to cover before we adjourn is the status of the program in general. The program is funded through payroll contributions. Once you pay into it for 10 years, you get premium-free Part A, as we talked about here a few minutes back. What is the funding status of the program? How is it looking? Social Security, the funding status is dwindling a little bit. How's Medicare doing?
Yeah. Current projections, somewhere around 2031 to 2033 is the expected insolvency date for the Medicare Trust Fund. And that's not an exact science. The CBO puts out a projection, and someone else puts out another projection, but they're all going to be within the next, 8 or 10 years, around in there. Now, I think the important thing to understand is people hear Medicare insolvency and they panic and think, oh my gosh, Medicare is going bankrupt. There's not going to be money left. It's really just the trust fund for Medicare Part A that we're talking about here. So to use an analogy, if you have a checking account and a savings account and you're living not quite within your means and your checking account can only cover 85% of your living expenses every month, and every month you're having to dip into that savings account to cover that other 15% of your living expenses. That's kind of what we're talking about here with Medicare. So if that trust fund goes insolvent, Medicare will still be able to cover, 85% or whatever the exact number is of benefits and expenditures. It just will not be able to cover those final, 10, 15%, again, whatever that number is. So it's not that Medicare is necessarily going to go bankrupt and run out of money and not be able to pay for your care. It is just going to not have any extra money to make ends meet on the very back end. Now, that's not ideal, obviously, but it's also not the panic situation that I think a lot of people go into when they hear Medicare insolvency. So, we've seen Congress kick the can down the road a number of times, throw some money at it, extend it by 5 years, extend it by 10 years. Obviously, that's not a long-term solution. I think eventually we're going to see a day where Medicare Part A maybe does come with a mandatory premium like Part B. Part B is not in danger of insolvency, and a big reason why is because there is that mandatory monthly premium that helps keeps it afloat. we may reach a day where we do see something like that with Medicare Part A. We may see the eligibility age realign with Social Security, and maybe bump up the social or the eligibility age for Medicare. Obviously, you could cut benefits. I think that's kind of probably the last solution that anybody really wants to see. There are a number of things that can happen. Obviously, a reason why we're in this boat is because the baby boomer generation over the last several years has begun to age into Medicare. So now we have less people in the workforce paying those payroll taxes, more people in the system that are using the benefits. Could we continue to kick the can down the road another 20 years until the baby boomer generation phases out and the numbers realign? Possibly. I'm punching above my weight class there with that projection. I think politically, neither party wants to be the one responsible for the death and disappearance of Medicare. Which demographic does a lot of voting? It's over 65. And I think by and large, Medicare is pretty darn popular with the beneficiaries. There's something like 64 million people on Medicare right now. It's not a perfect system, and you can certainly criticize it, but by and large, people are generally pretty satisfied with their Medicare and would probably not be too thrilled if it went away. I think everyone in Congress on both sides of the aisle understands that, and I don't think either party wants to, be caught holding the bag if it ever disappeared. So I don't know what the answer is. Kicking the can down the road again and again is, probably not exactly it's a Band-Aid. It's not a solution. If I had to guess, I would maybe take a stab at adding a mandatory premium to Part A to help keep it afloat and offset. The trust fund has been running a deficit just about every year since the recession in 2008. So this isn't a brand new thing. We've been dealing with this for a good 15 years now, running a deficit, dipping into that trust fund, into that savings account to make that last 10 or 15% of expenditures every month or every year. We could probably do an entire podcast episode on this topic alone, but it's kind of where it's at. But I think my message for people is when they see headlines in the news about Medicare becoming insolvent by 2032 or whatever, don't panic. It doesn't mean that Medicare is going to run out of money. It's just the trust fund they're talking about. Even if it went insolvent, Medicare could still cover, I think it's something like 85% of your benefits. Again, we don't want to get to that place, but it's a little bit better than, Medicare completely running out of money and 64 million people, not having health insurance.
Totally. I really like your analogy of the checking and the savings account. And, we run into people who are convinced that Social Security is going to go away for the same reasons.
Yeah.
And just like Medicare, right, these two programs are very adjacent to one another. The trustees of the Social Security Trust Fund have to do an actuarial projection, trying to figure out how long the funds in the trust will last for, and then project out how much benefits the incoming revenue to the program will pay from that point on. And the timeline for Social Security is very similar. It's somewhere around 32 to 34 is when they expect the trust fund to be depleted. But from that point forward, because of the demographics of our workforce, people on payroll who will be contributing more money into the system at that time, they think that the Social Security system will have enough incoming cash to pay 75% of benefits for at least the next 100 years thereafter.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is the economy has been a little bit more resilient over the last year or two than I think a lot of people expected. And when we have lower unemployment rates and higher rates of wages, that means more money comes into Medicare and Social Security. And on top of that, we've talked a lot on the show over the last year or two about inflation and interest rates. The money that comes into the Medicare and Social Security trusts by law must be invested in only U.S. government securities. And guess what? Interest rates are a lot higher today than they were 12 months ago. So the money that comes into the trust is earning substantially more in interest than it was 12 months ago. And that could impact the dynamics here a little bit as well. But I'm with you. There are only so many levers to pull. I hope that our elected officials can start pulling those levers, maybe go from like 1 to 2 on one of the levers instead of being forced to go from 1 to 7, 8 or 9 years down the road.
Yep.
I'm not optimistic that that's what's going to happen, but those are the trade-offs.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point there about the interest rates, because I believe just if you backed up just a few years, the insolvency date was only like 7 years away. And now it's like 9 years away. So it has actually gotten a little bit better in the last couple of years. We don't love the high interest rates, but it does have some perks to it in other ways.
Yeah. COVID crushed the projections for a short period of time.
Yeah.
Because they had a lot of people unemployed all at once, fewer dollars going into the trusts, and then everything rebounded a lot faster than anybody expected, and that improved the outlook.
Yeah.
Well, Christian, let's wrap this up. This was awesome. I really appreciate you enlightening us on all these issues. Tell us about your stuff. Where can people find you? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, helpadvisor.com.
That's health, HEALTH, advisor.com?
I'm sorry, help, HELP, helpadvisor.com.
Helpadvisor.com, excuse me.
Helpadvisor.com, yep. And a couple of the websites that I often point people to, very easy to remember, MedicareAdvantage.com and MedicareSupplement.com. So if you think that you might go the Medicare Advantage route, MedicareAdvantage.com works with a lot of the leading insurance carriers all around the U.S., you can compare plans, talk to agents, etc. And if you want to go the Medigap route, MedicareSupplement.com will offer you the same experience on that vertical. So those are kind of the two places that I point people for help.
Right on. We'll link to all of the above in the show notes so if people want to check those out. And appreciate your time again, Christian. This has been really cool.
Thank you. Absolutely. Let's do it again sometime.
Right on.
Thanks for tuning in to Grow Money Business, the podcast dedicated to helping business owners optimize income, pay less in tax, and invest prudently. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever you digest podcasts to ensure you don't miss out on future episodes and announcements. And feel free to submit questions to growmoneybusiness.com.